Hello, it's Paul Britton, Chief Executive for Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I'm back with the next one-to-one in 20 interview, this time with Becky Coffin, who's Director of Communities for London Heathrow Airport. In this session, we're talking with Becky about the contribution that her team has made to both safeguarding jobs, but also to try and help the wider region to bounce back from COVID-19. We talk about the technology that's been introduced with the airport terminals and encouraging holiday makers to make their return to the UK's hub airport. I hope you enjoy the session. So hello Becky, very good to see you again.
Hello Paul, great to see you too.
So this is our one-to-one in 20. This is 20 minutes of our conversation with you representing Heathrow today. And obviously Heathrow, a magnet for investment here in the UK and a powerhouse for the Thames Valley region economy. So I thought we'd start, given the scale of your organisation, just with, perhaps you could just share details about your role and the team that you're responsible for. I think that'd be really helpful.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so I joined Heathrow back in 2017, but since earlier this year, I've been leading our communities team. So as Director of Communities, I oversee our engagement with all of the local communities. And we get involved in three key ways. So firstly, the activities we do to get out and listen to communities, both in the villages around the airport, but also more broadly in the boroughs. We also do quite a few community investment activities, everything from Heathrow Rangers who are out in some of the local villages, making a difference, picking up litter and supporting communities, to our partnerships with local schools around the airport. Then secondly, we do a lot of work to help mitigate and manage the operational impacts of the airport, because we know that those who live near the airport are affected by noise and other impacts. So we have a dedicated helpline and respond to a lot of queries and provide a lot of information. And then thirdly, we have a team that focuses on engaging with local stakeholders that are important to the future of the current operation and the future of the business, local authorities, and of course, chambers of commerce and other business networks.
Yeah, and I take away from that a lot of your focus is external and working with organisations like chambers and local authorities and businesses. But before we get into some of the focus of that role, perhaps just some reflections more internally about, I suppose you could describe it as the Heathrow family, if you like, and obviously challenging times at the moment. What does it feel like at the moment? What's life like within Heathrow right now, based upon the fact that we are still very much in the teeth of this pandemic, you could say?
Yeah, we are, and as you've alluded to, it's been felt very, very keenly at Heathrow over the last few months. And the other reflection I would add is about kind of our role as a team. Is we're very much, as well as being the face of Heathrow out into the community, we're also the voice of the community back into the business, and that is really important role for us to be able to help the business, understand how the community is faring and what's happening out there as well. And that's something that's been absolutely critical over the last few months. Yeah, if I wind back to February, when I first joined the communities team and then took over as leading it, and we were obviously then in the throes of developing our expansion plans and very focused on moving towards submitting an application for consent at the end of this year. We're in such a different place now.
Yeah.
So by the end of March, obviously we had a decision from the courts around the judicial review, and we were also really seeing, the huge impact of COVID on aviation, global aviation virtually coming to a standstill. And at Heathrow, what that's meant is in Q2 of this year, so the period from April to June, we saw passenger numbers fall by 96%. So that's obviously had a huge impact on everybody, all of the companies as well as Heathrow that are based here at the airport, and of course, therefore, many families and those who work around the airport as well. And to give you a flavour of where we are now, because we welcome the air corridors that are opening up, and beginning to see more families coming to the airport, taking holidays, and more people travelling. Normally at this time of year, July, August, absolutely our busiest time. The airport is a real kind of hive of activity. we'd expect to see around 250,000 passengers kind of passing through the airport at the peak. At the moment, we're averaging probably around 15 to 20,000 a day at the moment. So that gives you a kind of a feel for the contrast. And we've shared some information about the forecast we're using, and we expect to see, we do expect to see a gradual recovery. We're hoping to see around 60%, or we forecast to see about 60% of passenger numbers this year. A fall of 60% this year, and then probably next year gradually creeping back up. We're expecting a shortfall of about 20% to 22% next year. So yeah, it's been a very difficult journey for aviation, and a very unusual period when the airport was so quiet during lockdown. I think kind of to think about the positives of it, what we did do was really see the local community and the airport and the businesses and authorities really putting together. So a lot of my team's work has been getting out and providing support into the community where it was really needed during those really difficult weeks. So we were involved in things like the Rangers that I mentioned earlier. They were taking donations from catering companies and retailers around the airport who had some produce they couldn't use. They were taking those in their vans and delivering them to food banks and to schools in communities around the airport. So we were really pleased to be able to do something, really practical to help during those times. And many of our colleagues have been out volunteering in their communities as well, supporting those who, really have suffered during the last couple of months.
And I mean, there has been a shift in emphasis. I've noticed that with the policy statements and the work of John Holland-Kay, your chief executive, in lobbying government, that the messages at the start, understandably, are around what interventions government needed to make in order to ensure that Heathrow and other airports are in a position to bounce back. But within that, it's very much about, well, it's not just about Heathrow bouncing back, it's actually about the wider economy and the region. And for businesses that I work with, within an hour of Heathrow, that's our region, the impact of any restrictions upon Heathrow, both from a cargo and a passenger point of view, you mentioned the word keenly, they are felt keenly through that supply chain. Perhaps just some other reflections upon what you and colleagues are working on at Heathrow to make sure that what you are in a position to be able to influence, you are leading in that, and you are looking to make Heathrow a safe and effective place for passengers and for colleagues as well, because it's important in times of stress to focus on what you can control. I know I've read there's been some really quite profound investments that have been made around technology, for example. So is there some ideas you could share around that?
Yeah, no, you exactly pick on the right point, Paul, because what we believe is that passengers can now be confident to fly, but that's because a huge amount of work has been done both by us but also by many of the other airport partners who have been part of that work. So you will have such a different experience when you come to the airport now, and the sorts of things that you will see. A couple of examples to share with you. We have these points called fly safe pit stops, where you can get hold of for free face masks, hand sanitizer, etc., to kind of, those measures that you need to feel confident as you pass through. You'll also see a lot of different things in terms of the cleaning procedures. So we've implemented UV sanitization. We have UV robots that are moving around. We're moving to trial some touchless security procedures, just to make the journey that a passenger makes through the airport as safe as we possibly can. And as you rightly say, not only for passengers but also for our colleagues who are working and have been throughout as well.
Yeah.
And we've also been introducing a number of different different testing trials, because I think that the key message that we and local businesses need to keep making is that there is a role here for the government to ensure that there is a really strong and robust common international standard for testing, because that is what will make the difference in opening up air travel to all parts of the globe, not just to the air corridors where we've got the quarantine lifted at the moment. So you'll see trials at the airport of things like thermal screening, but also we're doing trials of swab testing as well, and we're sharing the results of our trials with government so that they can take that into account as they develop policy. But we're very aware of how important the US market that Heathrow links to is to business and to businesses, particularly in the Thames Valley area. And what we need to see there is a testing regime that can be adopted so that we can open up quarantine-free or reduced quarantine corridors on those routes, because we know how important they are for business. So we've started the journey and we welcome what's been done so far, but there's clearly a lot more to do.
Yeah, there's a lot more the government can do as well. I've heard the expression around this quarantine roulette, I think was one expression that was used. And it is about, as you say, giving confidence to those, the holidaymakers or business travellers that, you're in a position that whatever plans you are making are going to be impacted by either decisions made in the UK or elsewhere. And that universal approach is going to help in that.
Universal is absolutely the point, because this is not a place for the UK to stand on its own. We need to work together, but the UK can absolutely take a lead, because there's a lot of research and information that we have that can be used.
Yeah, and I suspect from your do we call them competitors or counterparts, but your counterparts from across Europe as well, and the learning from that, because ultimately there's a shared win here.
And it is an issue that airports are working together on. It's important if we're going to be opening up corridors with testing. It's important that the airports at both ends of that are in conversation together about how that can work.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's going to be of interest to everybody listening. So some reflections. I was thinking about the work that your team specifically are doing with the community. You mentioned a good amount of that, but going back to the point around making sure that not just Heathrow thrives, but the region also thrives as well. Some examples as to where your team are looking to plan and prepare our business communities as well for the adjustments that they're having to make, and perhaps some reflections in particular. Our members are interested around the work in terms of ReSkilling, perhaps either for those that have been impacted directly within your workforce or those within the wider community. I know that's a core focus for you and your team.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think, from day one, it was clear to us that the impact of a slowdown at Heathrow was going to have big ramifications, not only for those who are directly employed at the airport, but also their families and the businesses that are in our supply chain and the supply chain of the airlines and others at the airport. So, we are very aware of kind of our how interwoven into the local economy around all sides of the airport we are. And what that led us to do was to realise pretty quickly that we had a role to play in local economic recovery. And I think what we really wanted to make sure was that we could actually hear what people thought and what people needed. Because in these situations, it's very easy to make an assumption, but actually it was really important to quickly get a handle on what is important and what will make a difference for those who need it. So during July, we held a series of 3 roundtables, and Lord Blunkett, who's worked previously with Heathrow on the skills agenda as part of the expansion plans, we were delighted to have him back, and he chaired those roundtables, and we brought together, businesses who are based or have a strong presence at the airport, local chambers who represent businesses like yourselves, local authorities, and also local enterprise partnerships as well. And we had, through our conversations prior to that, we saw that there were 3 themes that seemed to be most important. So the first was the one that you referenced, Paul, which is about the impact on employment and skills, and what are the opportunities for reskilling for those who are losing their jobs or needing to move. Secondly, the opportunities around innovation and business in the supply chain, and how do we really open up Heathrow's supply chain so that those opportunities are available for small and local business to take advantage of at this time. And then thirdly, what's being, widely talked about as the green recovery. So for us, that kind of takes two angles. One is about, what are some of the technologies and the advancements that will probably accelerate actually as part of aviation recovering in the cleanest way possible out of this. And then also secondly, local transport and access to the airport by public transport, and how we plan to kind of continue connecting Heathrow locally, regionally and nationally in the future. So those are the three themes, and we had really rich feedback. It was great. We had well over 70 local stakeholders coming to those three events, which is fantastic turnout at these times. And we had some really interesting feedback, and there are a number of things that I think all stakeholders want to see government doing. There are also things that stakeholders are asking us as Heathrow to do. And then there are other things that I think everybody is suggesting we need to kind of pull together and work on. And to talk about your specific point on reskilling and that agenda, and there are a number of things I think we'd like to see all of the businesses in this area, kind of making, putting a focus on. And that is, firstly, taking advantage of the new government schemes that have been announced recently, like the Kickstart programme, because I think there's a lot in there that we can use. Secondly, we've done a lot of work prior to this around apprenticeships, and they were really, I think over the last few years, businesses have really understood what the opportunity is there for developing great people and enabling people to get that experience and education at the same time. And so I think it's really important that we all don't forget apprenticeships during this period, but keep that going. And then thirdly, thinking about kind of opportunities to support reskilling. We are looking to work to continue working with local partners around development programs and signposting people to other industries and to other opportunities where that's relevant. So I think in that area it was a really big focus in the conversations, and one where I think everybody believes we can work together. And the other partner actually that I forgot to mention that we had in the room were a number of the local colleges and universities, who I think have got some fantastic ideas about how we can make the most out of this situation.
Yeah, I mean, my experience of working with universities and the colleges in particular is that perhaps in the past they've not described themselves as the most agile of organisations, but I have seen a great deal of agility from from them, and the Kickstart programme you mentioned, which is has been well received across the Chamber network. This is a good opportunity. We still need a little more information and around it so that we can really guide our businesses, but the headlines around providing opportunities of work and supporting employees by that opportunity of work are striking. We're looking forward to playing our part with that as well. Are we still seeing, in terms of the asks within the business community, we have our, I suppose, equivalent of those sense checking sessions around this time of year on our business manifesto, and for the last 4 iterations of that, two of the priorities have been around Heathrow, both in terms of Western Rail access. That's that 6 kilometre bit of track that will link Slough to Terminal 5, and then that would be a transformational project. And of course, there's the expansion itself. So, what's the sentiment that you're feeling as a business community now, and how are you perhaps expecting that to change as we do start to see green shoots of recovery? We look to get back to whatever that new normal looks like.
Yeah, very good question. So, I mean, and just touching on that to bring it to life, the airport is obviously a much more vibrant place now than it was back in April, and we've seen a lot of retail reopening, which is great to see. Everything from duty free to Dixon's to Harry Potter World, which I'm sure some of our younger passengers are very keen on. So yeah, it's really positive to see that, which means a lot more colleagues coming back to the airport. I think in terms of future development, so yes, we're very keen to engage with yourselves and the member businesses around Thames Valley regarding Western Rail. There's a huge opportunity there, and what we now need to see is a move towards how it's going to be funded. That's kind of the key next step there. So that's exciting to keep the momentum up on that project. I think on expansion, so just in terms of where we are in that process, so we were very pleased in May to hear that our request to have an appeal heard at the Supreme Court regarding the judicial review decision, that was accepted. So that appeal is going to be heard on the 7th and 8th of October this year. So whilst our focus has absolutely been on COVID over the last few months and remains on that, at the same time we will be preparing for that appeal, and we expect to hear the decision probably later this year or early next. And if you step back a little bit from the situation that we're in now, we're confident that we will be seeing a return as confidence builds again, and once we see a return to pre-COVID levels, you can see the path to where future expansion, there will be a requirement for that at Heathrow. So we are approaching October confidently and looking forward to the next steps from there.
And we need to see, John Holland is joining us at a Windsor debate session in the third week of September around the future of travel. And I think integrating that, I think what I'm seeing both from airlines and also from Heathrow as well is an acknowledgement that green tech, that clean tech has such an important role to play in the future of travel, in order to both grow the capacity, but also to provide that in a way that we all want, which is an environmentally friendly way. So certainly picking up those messages in recent weeks and months as well. We've got a little time left. It's at this point that I get down to probably more of the personal reflections, if that's okay. And that's important to do that because all team leaders, all managers and chief execs are finding themselves in new territory when it comes to their roles and how they respond, both on behalf of their customers or their suppliers or their colleagues. So any reflections from you perhaps as to what you've learned about yourself or team members and colleagues during what I'm sure has been a very challenging 3 or 4 months now, Becky?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul, because I think it's important for all of us to take a moment to reflect, because the intensity that many people have been working under, that everybody needs a break, everybody, and it's important to do that, and fortunately some of us are able to take a summer holiday now, which has been really important. I think the two reflections that I would share with you is, the first is that something I've become really aware of is how different everybody's experience and journey through this crisis has been, and that the need for empathy is probably more than ever, and that feels really important to me in my role, because our team is listening to and engaging with people from all sorts of different environments who have had all sorts of different experiences through this. But I think in every meeting that I go to, it's important to remember that some people have been shut away, but others have been out there on the front line. Our airport didn't close at any point, which we're very proud of, which meant that some of our fantastic colleagues were out there every day seeing passengers safely on their way, bringing important supplies into the country and helping people be repatriated back to their families. Similarly, people have been on furlough and others haven't, and if you've been on furlough, you've had a very different experience of this than someone who's been coming in every day, and not saying that one is better than the other, but it's certainly something I think we all need to be aware of. So I think embracing difference and different experiences is probably something that really feels kind of front of mind at the moment. And then my second reflection is probably about resilience, because personally, particularly at the beginning of the crisis, I had to dig deep, and I think many others did too. And it's really made me believe in the strength of kind of pulling together as a team, and the fact that actually, we all draw a lot of strength from our colleagues and the people that we work with. And actually, through a challenge, had any of us predicted that we would be having this conversation like this, or that we would be going through big change processes and changing the way that we work and doing it all virtually? We would have, if you'd said this a year ago, we would have all said it's impossible, we can't do it, but actually we can. So I think, it's been a great lesson in how resilient we can all be, and the great strength that we can draw from just working together.
I enjoy that. Thank you. I'm sure I'm a firm believer that, and I'm hearing this a lot from our members as well, just spending a little more time and listening intensely to, as you say, just to try and establish how the lockdown has impacted upon everybody individually is an important thing to do. And I think what we're seeing across our business community is a lot of good practice around how you just perhaps, as you say, pause and take that time to be able to engage with everybody, because that perhaps is going to be, along with the economic challenges, it's going to be one of the big challenges about how you equip people with the tools that they need in order to feel confident, to travel, or to be back to their place of work, and to try and get back to business as usual. So a huge amount in there, thank you. I just wanted to close by asking if there were any, perhaps a couple of call to actions for our business community and for the Chamber ourselves in terms of what you would like to see from us in support of Heathrow.
I think the first and most important one is, spread the word that about how safe it is to fly now. You've heard what I've said today, but there's plenty of information out there. There are videos on Heathrow's website that help you understand the measures that are in place. But spread the word that Heathrow is open for business, and that flying is coming back to where it was. That's probably the first and most important thing, which will be critical to enabling us to re-engage with those investment opportunities that many businesses rely on. The second one I think we've touched on, which is about I think there's a lot of opportunity for supporting employment going forward through the education and skills routes that I mentioned earlier. And then the third and final one is, I think, is in conversations with government or with other stakeholders. We call on those around the airport who rely on the airport to really support our message about this need for a common international testing standard, because that is what will really make the difference in opening up aviation in its fullest way. So yeah, we welcome the support to do that.
Yeah, well, I know we've got a very vocal business community. We've got a very active policy team here at the Chamber. I know that we're working closely with you on that, and I think that the way that Heathrow and your colleagues have worked through the challenges and engaged with our members in that process and getting as practical and on the ground view as you can as to what's impacting businesses large and small. I think they've got the credit there. So thank you very, very much for your support to us and our members as well. I just close by saying the very best to you, your colleagues, and we do all look forward to being in a position to be able to take that break soonest. I think it's very much the conversation over the dinner table across many households across the Thames Valley now. We're at that time, and like you, I'd encourage folks to just perhaps ponder upon how things are getting easier and to take that opportunity as well. Thank you very much, Becky. Very good to see you again, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Great to see you too.